Welcome in, everybody, to another special edition of the Brett Allen Show, a pop culture podcast where we talk about your favorite shows, film, television, music, comedy, more. Wherever pop culture is, you will find us hanging out. Today, we are talking about, I swear, one of the best shows um, on television right now. And I can relate to this because I honestly grew up in a situation very similar. I'm sure you hear this all the time. We're talking to Tim Baltz, Righteous Gemstones. Thanks for hanging out, my friend. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. So you grew up in one of these environments?
Oh, very much so. I mean, it's so relatable. And it's interesting because I think I heard an interview that Danny McBride did, who is one of the creators of this show, Jody Hill, that this is kind of based on like some personal experiences as well that he had, these types of churches and things. Did I understand that correctly? Because it's very relatable.
I think so. I mean, they grew up, in the Mid-Atlantic, I think North Carolina and Virginia. So I won't speak for them, but I think I've read Danny said that his aunt is a nun, I believe.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, there's something to that effect. I grew up in a town that had a lot of Catholic churches and
Okay.
some other denominations. It wasn't really big enough for a mega church, but I think when I was in high school, like these towns out, a few towns away, these churches, with that kind of um, I don't know, like crowd size started to pop up.
Yes.
And I would go to their youth groups with like my cousin or a friend or something like that. And the sheer size of it and the shift to this kind of like rock and roll kind of popular, I don't know, like rock concert kind of feel started to become more prevalent. And I grew up in the Midwest, so that was just my region. I know that was already kind of native to other regions, but for me, that was the first time that I kind of met that. And, and it was so different from the Catholic churches that I'd gone to.
Yeah, well, I was I wouldn't say mega church, but a large church youth pastor for a very long time. So,
Oh,
like
wow.
a lot of this is very familiar in a lot of different ways. I mean, of course, it's HBO, it's television, it's exaggerated quite a bit, but I find myself at certain moments um, relating to this on a very personal level. I think that's probably why I have such an infatuation with the show because it's just so vaguely familiar. But you are a part of this fantastic cast. We're in the second season and we've got a few episodes out. I know, I don't know if it was the pandemic or whatever, but things kind of took a long time to get a second season out. But once we did, can you let people in on your sort of involvement with this and your character and how he kind of fits into this season? He's kind of coming into his own as a person. The baptism and the whole thing was just over the top, Tim. It's just unbelievably hilarious.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, there's definitely he has a unique path to acceptance from his in-laws and the greater Gemstone family. BJ is marrying into the family through Judy Gemstone, who's the
Yeah.
middle child in the family. And I think, she is always kind of yearning for acceptance herself among the siblings, especially with Jesse, who's played by, Danny McBride, and Judy's played by the brilliant Edie Patterson. And she and BJ have this very kind of unique, difficult to describe love. Feels like a very unconditional love where
Yes.
they understand each other on a frequency that other people from the outside don't quite understand. But I think that their journeys are somewhat parallel, where she's trying to get acceptance from her father and her brothers and secure a bigger place in the church, and BJ's trying to gain acceptance from the family and secure a place within uh, literally just like the church lunch table. Uh, and when we first did the pilot, Danny, we were sitting with the executive producers, and Danny said, you're kind of the eyes of the audience in the pilot. You're looking at the family the way that the audience is going to be looking at the family, but you're inside the show.
Yeah.
So their behavior, whether it's crass or vulgar or antagonistic toward one another, you're reacting the way that a regular audience member would react. And that definitely helped set me on a path of understanding what the role was in season one, and then fighting for acceptance, kind of being pushed down by the all the Gemstone siblings, not being respected by baby Billy and Eli. Um, and
Yes.
then in season two, thinking that, oh, everything's going to be fine once I'm baptized, and obviously it's not. The baptism is a total disaster. And I don't want to spoil too much, but BJ does make some inroads
Yes.
with the family. But I mean, it comes at a physical and emotional price.
Yeah, it's interesting because as funny as this is to watch and to sort of go, my God, poor guy, really like there's a lot deeper context there on a very visceral level. Like he really is trying to fit into this family, which he clearly has very little or nothing in common with outside of his relationship, with Edie's character. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah,
really, you find yourself rooting for you a lot because I think most people have probably seen Up to the Baptism, which really kind of parallels as a wedding reception, which is just this off the wall thing that you guys are doing. But again, having grown up and been a part of this world to a degree, like a lot of it is very like it's not too far off from what could possibly exist and be, because I've been a part of very similar types of events. But you and just the entire cast, my friend, do such a beautiful job. I mean, this is such a well done show, and it was a hard wait between season 1 and 2. Are
oh
you
yeah,
are you all still filming this, or is it all in the can at this point, and now we're waiting to see what's next?
yeah. Season two is in the can. We actually tried to start it before the pandemic began. We got 2 days
Right.
into filming before it shut down. So that was it was difficult. I mean, the pandemic's been tough for everybody. But we were so excited to get started, and then, got sent home. And but we got through season two, and we'll go back for season three, which got announced a few weeks ago.
Yes.
We'll go back for that in a few months. Uh, and I mean, in general, the cast is so talented. I think Danny, everyone at Rough House, all the writers, um, have put out hit after hit after hit in TV and in film, and somehow they're still underrated. But they're incredible filmmakers. I've worked with a lot of people, and it is just really cool to watch how they straddle certain genres.
Yeah.
Because there's like it's a family drama, but it's a family comedy, and it's
Yes.
also the scope of the world is so huge, and it's saying, it's satirizing all these different kind of subcultures and blending them together so perfectly. I've always just shown up being like, I'm gonna play my character as earnestly as possible, which I think brings some of the most laughs and helps create that kind of world of truth and honesty and family dynamic. And then I just get to learn from all these people. I mean, you're standing in a scene with John Goodman and Walton Goggins. Edie comes from improv the same way that I do, but is a little older and has different, experience um, and is brilliant. Cassidy Freeman's been working, for
Yeah.
15 years. Divine comes from Workaholics, and just all these people coming together. Greg Allen, Greg Allen, like, he did theater in Chicago before I was born, and then did Baywatch and is a director. I mean, there's so many brilliant people on the show that we're lucky that we get to come together and let Danny and Roughhouse and David Gordon Green and Jody Hill kind of take care of the tone. Uh, and what comes out of that tone is something I think very unique
Yeah.
and very difficult to pull off.
Yeah, I mean they've done Eastbound and Down, they did Vice Principals, this and just a bunch of other projects as well. And it's interesting because when you watch interviews with Danny and Jody, they really do set the example for, if you want to create something, create it and do it, because you never know like what will come of it. and just starting out, and hearing their stories, all these stories, even the ones that you're telling. It's interesting. The term underrated is surprising to me, but man, these shows are just so good and just very well thought out from tip to tail.
Yeah.
Um, and, although it is funny, there's a lot of serious things, happening in the story as well. And really, every week to week, we just kind of sit ourselves down and go, God, what's going to happen next? Whether it's with your character or, these outrageous situations. I want to ask because a lot of the scenes you and Edie come from improv. A lot of these scenes that you have um, are just like the dialogue is hilarious. Are you improving any of that, or is that all just written pages, and you're just reading it because it's so good? Like you think to yourself, who talks to somebody like this?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just crazy.
The scripts are brilliant. I come from improv, I did Second City, I did everything that you
Yeah,
could do in Chicago before I moved. I didn't move to LA until I was like 33 basically. So if people are like, it created a show that was fully improvised. I've worked on other shows that are fully improvised based off outlines. And when we
yeah,
showed up, I was surprised at how um, game. I mean, I knew that Danny and all those guys are comfortable with improv and use it a lot, and you can definitely like feel how alive the dialogue is in those other shows. But I was surprised at how much they were like, yeah, you could say whatever you want, because I was reading the scripts, and what I was seeing in the scripts was brilliant dialogue
yeah.
that had been fine tuned to both sound real and like something crazy that you've never heard before. So I was always a proponent of like, well, let's get the script because the script is making me laugh really hard, and we got to get at least the script.
Yeah,
Um, but you know, we're blessed that they give us enough time to kind of, if we are inspired, go off the page or kind of say it in our own words. They really trust that they've cast the show well and that our instinct helps all the work that they've done and all their instinct. Um, and they're great too. And you see in the edit, well, we see in the edit, if you remember back to like on the day when you were filming, you're like, oh, cool, that little improvised part got in. And then it's like, oh, that one thing we did was really funny, but it's not in. But look at the pacing of the show. The pacing of the show is like sublime, and it moves really quickly, and it keeps you emotionally invested in the tragedy and the comedy, and it helps this joke hit really hard. So
yeah.
I I've been in post production with my own show, and I've watched those decisions are really difficult. And I don't know. It's they do trust us to improvise. Long story short, they let us improvise, and it's really always funny to see the episodes and see like, oh, cool, that made it in. Like in episode 1, when we're talking about BJ and Judy getting married at Disneyland or Disney World.
Yes.
Like Prince Eric was one of the things that got thrown out, and then we're all like riffing on it and improvising it. And then in the latest, there are also like tiny little moments too. Like in the last episode, in episode 7, um, I'll say this: you can cut it if you don't want it. But when Baby Billy drives away and his U-Haul truck tips over
Yeah.
and everything falls out, we were watching it happen, and I just went, the elixirs. And and Jody came up and he was like, that was really funny. Keep saying that at the end. And I'm like, sure.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. All of your characters are just so well finessed. Judy, Edie, going from like very sweet and kind to just like straight up gangster sometimes with some of the things that she says. And just like, oh my God, like I've dated some women like that. It's so funny.
Where are you
I want
from?
to I'm from the Midwest, Wichita, Kansas, but I've lived in here in the Bay Area for several years and
Nice.
have gone out and things, but I digress with that. You've been a part of some really great projects. I was just going through your repertoire before we talked, and Drunk History, of course, a bajillion dollar
Dollar
listings,
properties. Yeah.
bajillion dollar properties, a lot of things. But I'm very curious, and our listeners and viewers always find this fascinating. what led you to be a storyteller? You started out in Chicago, Second City, did all of that. What kind of interested you, Tim, in going, okay, this is something that I want to take on as a career, maybe?
I mean, it started kind of slowly. My dad had a master's in theatrical history. I grew up in Joliet, Illinois, and
Okay.
he had been a stage actor in the 60s and 70s. And then when my sister and I came along, he became a picture framer. But obviously, he had a master's. He was a brilliant person to just watch TV, film with, go to the theater with. So we kind of had that, but none of us really thought, oh, I want to do that. Then in high school, I started to get involved in the plays at school, and I played sports year round, and I had to quit baseball for one of them. And I was like, damn, that was kind of a big thing. I had to quit baseball for a play. Why? I'm going to try my best at it. And then I did, and I had a little success. And then through high school and college, I'd done like 15 plays. And I'd also discovered improv in Chicago for the first time. And that was just the light bulb went off. It made sense to me in a way that other things didn't make sense, even things that I was good at. So that
Yeah.
was a big thing, is that like the passion for it, the energy to try to get as good as possible at it was there. And even things that I was naturally good at, the energy and the passion wasn't
Sure.
quite there. So that stood out. And then I went to college at Loyola in Chicago, and as a way to dip toes in improv. And then, the more I did it, the more I would kind of look around and be like, man, I think I'm good at this. I think I have to keep doing it. And at every level, that just kept being true. I was as Midwest as you could get. Like, you don't leave a job unless you have another job lined up. You have to pay your bills. I moved to Chicago with about $200 in my pocket
Wow.
after graduation, so I was in panic mode. But the passion and the energy and the kind of fact that doing improv was very cheap and free, at least at the time. And there were so many good people in Chicago. It was crazy how many good people there were. Just a golden age, and not very careerist oriented. So it like, you were doing it because you wanted to be good at it. And then the main thing that decided was, with this guy Ted Tremper approached me to do this improvised uh, web series that was called Shrink, and then we turned it into a pilot and took it to New York Television Festival, won a few awards, got a production company attached, developed it, pitched it, sold it. All this takes like 6 years, but
Yeah.
seeing that up on a big screen, and winning awards, that's the thing that really made me think like, oh wait, the way that I'm funny on stage can work on screen. I can do this. That was kind of the big moment where I thought, okay, now I need to start getting technically better in front of the camera if I want to have a career. And I moved to LA, got very lucky, got cast in Drunk History, and that, even though you're just lip syncing, it really taught me production. It taught me you're on a set. Here's how the camera's here, so you need to be looking this way, or now you need to move an inch this way, and uh, it kind of held my hand through those kind of early moments. That and doing commercial work.
Wow, so fascinating. I spent a little time in Elmhurst and Bensenville,
Hey,
Illinois. So I missed the food, Portillo's,
oh boy,
Limonati's,
oh yeah,
Cafe Grand Lux, all of that. One question about Drunk History. You mentioned your lip syncing, because that is just another insane show too. Are you hearing audio playing in your ear, or do you have cue cards while you're lip syncing all that? Because I mean, literally, the people telling the story are hammered,
yeah.
and then you're it's. I wanted to ask about that, because how does that work, real quick? Is that has to be challenging, because you're doing this and then it's kind of a weird show, but it's interesting. It's funny and hilarious. Weird in the sense of how they're telling one side of the story and then you're like acting it out. It's just different.
Yeah, it was. it was not super easy to pick up right away. And then there'd be I joined in season 2. I did season 2 and 3. So there
Yeah.
were people from season 1 that were pros at it. Like Craig Kukowski was just amazing. And I remember they would send you the links the night before and you'd have your dialogue. And sometimes it'd be 1 line, sometimes it'd be, 6 or 8 lines. But like you said, the people are hammered. So they're like, their cadence is all choppy. So it's even harder. So I would sit and at night it'd be like 2 hours. I wake up early in the morning before driving to Santa Clarita, and I'd drill it in my head even more. And then you get there and there's a big sound truck, and the sound guy would play it like over the loudspeaker. So you'd be
Got it.
hearing it and you'd get to practice a little bit. But then probably halfway through the season, Maria Blasucci, who was in the cast, she had her headphones in and she was talking. And I was like, "Hey, Maria," and I was like, "Oh, sorry, you're on the phone." She's like, "No, I'm not on the phone." I was like, "Oh, well, you look like you were talking." She's like, "No, I'm doing my lines." I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, "Well, I recorded on my phone so that I can listen to it over and over and over again." I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm so stupid." She just had it in her voice memo notes on her iPhone. So that once I started doing that, it got a lot easier because you just memorize the cadence the same way that you memorize visually. You're just memorizing it audio wise, and it makes it a little easier. It's still tough, but
Yeah, I can imagine. One last question, Tim, and I'm very curious. I think our listeners and viewers, again, just love this because we don't get to hear this often in interviews. But what is the best advice that you've been given as a storyteller, as an artist that sort of has sustained you throughout the trajectory of your long and fantastic career?
oh, thank you. Well, I think that every kind of scene has an objective within the larger context of a story, which has an objective. And some people like to break things down into their components um, because it helps them kind of analyze what's happening. Other people, it just kind of reduces the anxiety to kind of focus on one thing at a time. And as a storyteller, when you're looking at that objective from the smaller instance of a scene to how the scene fits into the larger context to the larger context of an episode or a story, whatever the case is, focusing on what that objective is and trying to accomplish it one little piece at a time really helped me because especially when you're coming from improv, you kind of like, the wheels are off, you're going as fast as you can. When you get into kind of scripted, narrative drama or comedy, you can't really do that. You have to be focused, you have to be precise, and understanding what the objective of that scene is, what your emotional objective is, helps you just focus. So you're just focusing on this one little piece. And that's also helped me as a writer, helped as an improviser, I always tried to stay in the moment, and it helps me there too. But when I'm reading something, when I'm preparing for something, I like to look at things at that size and with that objective. When I have the time, that's always really helped. I mean, a bit more of a technical note, the other note is be nice to everyone, be helpful to everyone. You don't only be nice to the people that you think
Yes.
can help you. Because I've come across a lot of people that were, pretty crappy to me when they thought that they didn't need me, and now that they need me, they're like, "What's up, dude?"
Oh, you're
And
awesome. Yeah.
yeah, and you're like, "Well, that's fine. I understand how the world works, and I'm flattered that you think that now, but um, there are people that were nice to me when I was a nobody to them, and they're nice to me now, and I'm gonna go with them, not you, because I trust them, and that behavior made me trust you less."
Dig the well before you're thirsty. That is the best advice.
You said it way better than I could.
No, that's great. Well, Tim, fantastic job. Everybody, please make sure to watch The Righteous Gemstones Sundays on HBO Max. Stream it, binge it. It's amazing. Drunk History, I think, is out there streaming somewhere. I think Hulu, it's available. All the other amazing projects. Tim, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
My pleasure, Brett. Thanks for having me.